Welcome to all who are watching and listening to us. I am WWII and we are with you in this exclusive interview for Al Arab Al Jadid and the New Arab with the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. After a year and 8 months of genocide in Gaza, Albanese speaks to us a week after her mandate as UN Rapporteur was renewed by the UN Human Rights Council for another 3 years, despite attempts by political entities and pro-Israeli organizations to pressure for her removal and non-renewal. However, she is with us today. Francesca, we are delighted to host you. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm fine as one can be in the time of genocide.
Before we began talking about the latest developments in the genocidal war on Gaza Strip, it seems that these campaigns against you by several parliament member, politicians, some organization in the Western country has not successed removing you from the United Nations, and you still have 3 additional years. Do you think the United Nations is still immune to such a pressure? What do you say after your mandate was renewed?
Well, first of all, I would like to put things in context. This mandate has always been the object of vitriolic attacks, primarily from Israel, at times the United States. And of course, during my term, things have worsened because the facts on the ground have become extremely tragic, and the unlawfulness of Israel's occupation and the oil infrastructure is more and more evident what it has led to. And one of the critical points in my work is to point at the impunity that has been granted to Israel by member states, especially Western states, but not only. So yeah, I've triggered some sensitivity in a number of Western countries, namely Germany and France, Canada, the United States. So they have been quite vocal against me or the people in the Netherlands. But then in the Human Rights Council, no one asked for a vote. So yeah, the acrimony against my mandate stopped outside the Human Rights Council. So in a way, yes, there is still a lot in the United Nations that serves its purpose. And I would like to say independent experts of the United Nations have been the most vocal on denouncing the violations of the serious, grave, heinous violations of international law happening in the occupied Palestinian territory over the past 16 months. However, there is also the Commission of Inquiry, which has done an incredible job in documenting the evidence that can be used in trials as well, and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Of course, we move at different pace, but I would like to stress my mandate is pro bono. I'm independent. I'm not on the UN payroll. So you say it's not that I kept my job. I kept this huge mandate, which implies huge responsibilities. And again, I will continue to serve the Human Rights Council. It's not that I would have been unhappy had they decided to remove me, simply because I would have registered how far the hypocrisy of the system can go.
Um, 2 weeks ago, we saw also two British MPs from the Labour Party, Yuan Yang and Ibtisam Muhammad, were prevented from entering the occupied Palestinian territories after being detained at Ben Gurion Airport. What do you think will happen if the current UN rapporteur decided to go to Palestine? Will there be detention, and will you ever try to go during the next 3 years?
I have tried, and I was not permitted. Now, the thing is that I don't travel through Ben Gurion because I have no reasons to go to what remains of Palestine through Israel, because Israel has declared me persona non grata, so it's in the system if I try to go. But the point is that the borders with Jordan and with Egypt shouldn't be controlled by Israel. Now, the thing is that this is the most important thing that I would like your audience to understand, be familiar with, and own. Because in the discussion with governments, this is to be a constant reminder. International law obliges all member states not to recognize the consequences of an unlawful occupation. The occupation must go with its military component, the settlements, and the control over natural resources, airspace, and borders. The Palestinians must be allowed to enjoy the right of self-determination, meaning the right to exist as a people, as in the forms of exclusive statehood, as it was agreed during the peace process, in what remains of Palestine. So member states should behave accordingly. So dealing with Israel, letting it plan how much to retain control of in Gaza, or letting Israel continue to rule in the West Bank, this is wrong. So everything must change accordingly. There is a way out for Palestinians and Israelis, but it's a narrow alley, and it's marked by compliance with international law. Otherwise, it will continue to be lawlessness and violence.
Speaking about Palestine and occupied Palestinian territories, you stated last month that what's happening in the West Bank is ethnic cleansing. At what stage are we now in this ethnic cleansing in the West Bank? And is time really running out to save Palestinian people?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Every day time runs out, and we know because the assault against the Palestinians is total. There is no difference. If you're a Palestinian under Israeli military rule, your life is at risk in the Gaza Strip more acutely, but also in the West Bank. So the ethnic cleansing has been a constant for the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory, for the Palestinians in general, because it started with the Nakba, and I'm pretty sure your audience your readership is familiar with this. But I do see now what for many Palestinians is obvious. For us people in the West, it's less obvious, but I finally see that the ethnic cleansing has been a constant of Palestinian life under Israeli rule. And there have been phases where the ethnic cleansing has accelerated in intensity and capacity to really force out of their land, of their homes, hundreds of thousands and millions, in this case of Palestinians. And it has happened in 1947-49, when 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from the land. It's a very ugly term, but this is what happened. They were forcibly moved out of the land and never allowed to return. The same thing, 350,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced in 1967 when Israel occupied the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. But it's not that in the middle or ever since until now, the third phase of this accelerated ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the West Bank is not that there has not been forcible transfer or displacement of the Palestinians. It has been low intensity. So a silent Nakba, as Badil, a Palestinian organization dealing with refugees, calls it. So yes, in October 2023, I denounced, but 1 week after October 8th, when the genocidal assault started, I said there is a serious risk of ethnic cleansing, mass ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And in fact, it has happened, and it continues to happen. So the genocide is, in a way, a means to an end. The destruction of the Palestinians has become unavoidable because they don't want to move. Clearly, they don't move, even when everything is destroyed around them. They continue to stay in Gaza. That was very clear. So this is why the bombing has accelerated. And of course, it also meets with personal interest. I'm convinced that there is a lot of personal interest of the Israeli Prime Minister in this sinister reinflammation of the genocidal assault in Gaza. Many in Israel are raising their voice against it, but not enough to oust Netanyahu.
Mentioning Gaza, can you tell us about the latest updates from Gaza regarding the humanitarian situation? Like we know today, the Madani hospital was targeted again. Can you give us the latest update about what's happening in Gaza?
Look, it has become very, very difficult for me, for my mandate, to follow and verify all the information, the massacres, the killing of entire families, the destruction of the remaining infrastructure. So we see that Gaza has every piece of infrastructure in Gaza has been affected over the past 16 months. There has been an acceleration after the full end of the full breach of the ceasefire by Israel. And now the situation is there is a total block of the humanitarian aid. So since March 17, really no food, no water, no medicines, no fuel has entered the Gaza Strip. People are surviving with very little, and the conditions are inhumane, to say the least. I don't think that there is anything in modern history since the end of the Second World War to now, which is so sadistic and militarized as this attack. Because of course there have been other genocides, and no genocide is every genocide is horrible in its own accord, but this one is so militarized. I mean, people are killed in the dozens and hundreds in matter of hours, and there is nothing left. So today, for example, before this interview, I looked at the news, and one church had been bombed again, the Baptist church, one hospital, and then I saw the pictures of a father mourning his 6 children. Entire families continue to be hit because now it's also easier to target the population. They are intense. So when you hit a camp where hundreds of people are sheltered in plastic tents, of course you create a massacre, and this is what's happening. So the situation is beyond what words can describe. It's always been catastrophic. Now it's beyond, and people are pushed on beyond the mere survival. I really don't know how the people in Gaza are coping. It was the Palestinian organizations, the PINGO, the Palestinian Network of Human Rights and Development Organizations in Palestine, launched the alarm a few days ago, announcing that 91% of the Gaza population is at risk of malnutrition. 60,000 children have already been found risking developmental cognitive development issues because of the malnutrition. It's happening. It's not something that it's in the future, and it's happening on our watch.
I wanted to ask you, Francesca, how does the UN reporter operate under these circumstances? You mentioned this is like first time we witness things for a long time. I mean, the inability to present on the ground. What are the credible sources
Mm.
for preparing your reports, data collection, and documentation?
Look, during the 2020, from 2023 to 2024, it's been different, but in the beginning, there were Palestinian organizations still on the ground. They're still on the ground, but for example, in Gaza, many have been displaced so many times, and many have been killed. Others have been evacuated. So now it's very difficult for Palestinian human rights monitors to provide an accurate account. So I know that, for example, what comes from them is accurate within the limit of their capacity to monitor and document the reality around them. They cannot go around the Gaza Strip because the Gaza Strip is being heavily bombed. The second layer is the United Nations. While an important source of information have always been journalists in Gaza, in Gaza, for example, because Gaza was not accessible to anyone from outside, they would provide the first information regarding an assault and attack, and then I would verify that with UN personnel on the ground or others, including some Israeli former soldiers or others who had access to the information from within Israel. Now it's becoming more and more difficult. So we tend to rely on what comes from either the few United Nations personnel who have remained in Gaza and the journalists who are still there. Now my next report is not going to be on what's happening on the ground, on the massacres. I hope the Commission of Inquiry will continue to do that documentation. Frankly, it's beyond my capacity at the moment. It would be really patchy, the picture I would provide. But what I'm going to do, and I think it's very important for accountability and also for ending this once and for all, is to expose the private sector's complicity in maintaining for decades the infrastructure of the occupation, which has transformed into an infrastructure of genocide.
I have
I
a
mean,
question about this,
yeah.
as I know from a source that you are working on a new report about these companies. Can you
Mm.
tell us more about this?
Yeah, look, it's very interesting because I don't think it's new in the sense there are many Palestinian actors and others like Al-Haq has written reports about private companies' engagement in the occupied Palestinian territory. There are SOMO or others in who profits or don't buy into the occupation. Various entities, the BDS itself, they have really scrutinize the private sector. What I try to do is to provide the full picture and have it presented to the United Nations in a way that they have to look into this and see the map. Look, yes, I often say if Palestine was a crime scene, it would have the fingerprints of all of us because of course there are several sectors which are intuitively responsible for violations, complicity in violations, the military sector, the surveillance and sector. But the technology, the tools we use, the servers we use, the main corporations connected, I mean, the big names, they've all upgraded their services and their contract with Israel during the genocide. They've even provided
And
cloud,
it's a
the
lot of
cloud
companies
system.
also, a range of companies.
A lot of companies, and then I will tell you about that. But also, there are the what I call civilian businesses, those working on construction and destruction, like, well, I don't want to make names now because they will all be put on notice. I will tell you about the process, but then there is, the supply chain, those who help exploit Palestinian agribusiness and for profiting the settlements or others. What I focus, and also the banking system, the venture capitals, the non-profit, the charities, the universities, research centers. It's unbelievable. There is no one. This is why when I hear people still making recommendations to divest from the settlements, it's not about the settlement. Israel maintains an unlawful architecture, which is which is also built with the complicity and support of so many international businesses that member states should, in fact, prohibit from intervening in the occupation. But while there are the obligations under international law are on states, private actors are still under scrutiny because they need to observe due diligence when making businesses. And in the occupied Palestinian territory, they do not observe due diligence because the occupation is unlawful, operates in a land through Israel in a land where Israel has no rights. Therefore, they should stop. They should just stop and not invest at all. So
Is
this
this
is what
report
I'm,
coming soon?
yeah, in a month and a half, I hope.
Your positions, along with these of other individuals and international human rights organizations, you mentioned some around the globe, are clear about what should happen and what the demands are regarding putting Israel for accountable. However, that is not occurring. We are now 1 year and 7 months into this genocide, and there is a new international reality following the rise of Trump to power and the strength of right-wing parties in Europe. What is the future for international law and institutions that operate within it in light of this new reality?
Mm. It's a critical moment for the multilateral system, indeed, for a number of reasons. First of all, what is a system for if it doesn't work, if it doesn't manage to enforce its basic rules, like the prohibition of the use of force other than in given circumstances. I mean, no one is really challenging Israel's right to self-defense, which is right now non-existent. What Israel is doing is not self-defense. What Israel is doing is full destruction for political purposes. I mean, ideological or merely self-interest, but they are political. There is no military necessity to use force. All the more against the population which is under occupation. This is unlawful. So the United Nations right now are fragmented and quite paralyzed in their capacity to act as an organization, again, failing to make international law respected, failing to ensure humanitarian aid, failing to build a space for advancing peace. I mean, the discussions concerning truce and peace agreements, or not peace agreements, but just ceasefires are happening outside the United Nations. So it's a critical time. There have been times where the United Nations really made a difference in mediating the way out to conflicts and mediating peace. This is not happening right now for a number of circumstances, but also because there has been a much more aggressive policy against multilateralism from some states, like the United States. This is evident. The United States are trying to really, under Trump's administration, are dismantling the system as it was, but not just the United Nations system in general. Even the trade and tariff system, everything is in a critical phase. I don't have the crystal ball to predict what's going to happen next. I do believe that all are going to lose if the system fails.
A lot of people say that Gaza is a graveyard for the international law. Do you believe that after we have witnessed in Gaza, this graveyard will extend to other parts of the world?
Gaza is first and foremost the graveyard of thousands and thousands of Palestinians who have not even had the time to receive proper burial. And this is for me so critical. I mean, it's a haunting thought. Yeah, I think that to an extent it's fair to say that international law has failed, but not because of a limitation of international law itself as a system of rules, but because of the enforcement mechanisms that are not operating. International law is as strong as the will of states and the capacity of states to enforce it. And right now, this is failing, yes.
Western governments, despite differences in positions along some of them, seems unconcerned about taking practical steps to change the reality of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinian territories. At the same time, we have witnessed a historical global movement in solidarity with the Palestinian people around the world. And many opinion polls in most of countries indicate oppositions against this war. Why do you think there are no actions to stop the Israeli occupation and the genocide from these countries?
I think it's a combination of reasons. Right now, to be very, very honest and brief, uh, I think that no one has the capacity to exercise leadership and stop the US policies vis-a-vis the Middle East. No one, which is, I mean, I see some attempts quite, I mean, not particularly successful in my view, but I do see some attempts from some member states now to catch up with Arab countries. But again, I do think that this is a time for coherence and consistency. And this is also because in Europe, there are voters that are going to, and I think that Gaza will be a factor in the upcoming elections, because it's true that there has been a huge global movement. And now I think that countries like France, the land of all freedoms, right? Well, France has prohibited the protests in solidarity with, I mean, the demonstrations in solidarity with Palestine, but frankly against genocide.
But Macron
And
says he wants like to recognize Palestinian state now.
sure, great, right timing, 30 years later, but yeah, go ahead. And no, the point is fine, but this is again for me, this is a distraction because it says nothing about how it's going to stop the genocide. And this is why I'm saying I don't see real engagement. And I say the question is you need to be consistent with your words. If you want to help save lives in Gaza, you need to stop trading with Israel. I'm not asking for much. I'm not asking for a military intervention as France, for example, or other countries have done in the past. No, I'm not asking for it. I'm asking to stop trading with Israel. Right now, we need to be consistent. There is an obligation to stop genocide, and an arms embargo is clearly an obligation that many countries are violating, let alone through the F-35 program, but also, again, trading with a state which had just killed 18,000 children is beyond problematic and should be scrutinized at the domestic level because, in my view, from a legal point of view, there must be an investigation and look at possible complicities of both with criminal acts of both policymakers and CEOs of companies
But some
who
governments
have profit.
might say, like the Labour government in the UK, they said like we cut some of the our trade with Israel. What do you think about this?
Yeah, 30 licenses out of 330. It's not enough.
Okay. Um, Talking about solidarity movements with Palestinian people, what is the significance of this movement in the context of international law? Additionally, what do you believe these movements have yet to accomplish and could achieve?
Yeah, look, I think that the movement, the global movement, is proving to be the bulwark, the bulwark to like the bastion to protect a rule of law system. This is a civil society, which I often say is like the antibody of a healthy rule of law system.
Mhm.
And I think that they have, it continues to be very important to protest, to manifest their dissent vis-à-vis government policies for a number of reasons. First of all, I often say it's an act of sanity for the people themselves because it's dramatic. It's having a huge impact on many people. The thought that they are somewhat impotent and complicit as part of a state that supports the or enables the genocide. I mean, this is in a number of countries. So it's an act of sanity. It's also important because governments pretend not to hear, pretend not to listen, but they do listen. And again, I think that the mass ethnic cleansing of Gaza would have been would have gone much faster hadn't it been for the resilience of the Palestinians, but also for the global movement that has given, and this is the third and most important thing for me, has given the Palestinians a sense that they are not abandoned, that there is a struggle, that they are the first and foremost victims of a systemic injustice, but against that injustice, so many are mobilized.
Western media. Uh,
What have I not said about Western media?
what role does Western media play during the genocidal war on Gaza? Of course, we cannot categorize all media the same. There are differences, but there are also commonalities. How has
Yeah.
the Western media contributed to the genocide, and have we started to see shifts within some of these institutions?
Mm. The mainstream Western media, but I want to say there are Arab countries where the media has also been quite poor. But Western media in particular have sort of manufactured um, a consensus that the Palestinians had brought this havoc upon themselves on October 7. And there is a lot of information that has been amplified that was not true. There has been a use of inappropriate and inaccurate language. Uh, and there has been a tendency to replicate the Israeli military narrative instead of scrutinizing it. Very little demand, very little respect for Palestinian journalists who have been slaughtered in Gaza. Very little attention to the overall context and capacity to analyze what's happening in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip together.
When been asked to for an interview with Mr. Minda, how like you prepare yourself? Because we see like many of these interviews with you, you been sometimes attacked, you don't condemn Hamas, or I watch one of the interviews. The first question was for you: are you anti-Semitic? How you deal with this situation with the Western media?
I mean, this is what bothers me the most right now with over 50,000 people killed. Still, we start the interview with what the Israeli army says. I said, enough, do your job better. I mean, if you want to interview me, you interview me as an independent expert. So it's not easy. It's very frustrating, but at the same time, I say, look, it's not about me. This is the world we live in, and I just found myself into this, and I need to hold a strong moral ground and not take it personally and continue to speak the truth, what happens on the ground and its legal qualifications.
And how about universities and academics? How you perceive the siege on academic work in Europe university when it comes to discussing the Palestinian people rights and you personally were prevented from speaking at German universities and there's
Mm.
kind of atmosphere of fear along with
Yeah, yeah.
academics to address Palestinian topic. Are we
Yeah,
like
look,
in a new era of
Germany.
silencing academics now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There is an era of silencing, repression that started before me trying to speak at German university because I had been invited by these universities. So we're very rude. They first invite me and then they disinvite me without even communicating with me, without even sending an apology. This is the thing, again, the bad manners of my fellow Europeans are abysmal because they're still, they could have sent a letter, say, look, for security reasons, let's say, let's save our face. No, nothing. They just canceled without any explanation, any just caving into pressure from, I don't know, the Israeli ambassadors or Israeli ambassador in Germany and the city mayor. Then, I mean, I've been so disrespected in my authority as a UN independent expert that even the government itself, I mean, in subsequent meetings, expressed its sorrow and its apologies for what has happened. But again, it happened in their territory. And again, for me, it's not even what happened to me that it's critical, it's what happens to protesters who have been beaten by the police fiercely. There was police in the venues where, in the alternative venues outside universities where I gave my talks uh, and uh, and it was very violent, really very intimidating to see police in riot gears. The police in one event went to the moderator to say that we had to stop using certain words. The police. I mean, this is crazy. Where are we? Is it? This is no longer a safe space for freedom of expression. And I don't think the Germans themselves have realized how far the repression has gone already. And others are not dissimilar. Voila.
As an Italian and European citizen, are you afraid of the rise of far-right wings in Europe?
Yes, I am. But I've been for the past decades. I mean, I you don't the history of my home country, Italy, we had 20 years of pure fascism, and it was heavy for many. There are people who can adapt and can live under dictatorship and under fascism and have their jobs, but there are people who cannot live without freedom. And again, I'm knowing the history of my own country. I know that the arrival of fascism has been prepared by the relaxation around certain freedoms. Now there is a human rights system. We have constitutional rights, and constitutional rights are violated. The constitution is violated, and there is not enough care for it. And Italy is not the only country where it's happening. And when I know, for example, that the Constitutional Court in my own country is raising the alarm on certain relaxations of the constitutional system, the way the laws are made and the way the power is administered. But the population seem not to care. They can turn off the radio, they can turn off the TV, and it's not their concern. This is the problem.
I have another three questions and then we will finish very quick.
Yeah.
You often criticize the Western countries more than others in your speeches and remarks. What about countries like China, Russia, India? Some may question why these countries, which have good relationships with Israel and maybe also armed trades, do not face much criticism as well as much Western countries.
My main criticism has been toward Western countries because they have been the most vocal in upholding human rights and the rule of law at different stages of the recent past. So, and where is the respect for international law in Palestine over the past 16 months? So, for me, it was about calling member states who have made human rights a clear pillar of their not only their domestic policies, but also their foreign policies. So it was a matter of coherence and consistency. I know that other countries have huge issues, both internally and in their foreign policy, but they're not the vocal preacher than the preachers than Europe has been, for example. So
One last question, and we finish. You, Francesca, have lived and worked in Palestine. You lived in Jerusalem. If you had the opportunity to visit Palestine again, which places would you want to visit, and which activities would you like to engage in?
I would do what I've always done. I would go everywhere I can. I would go from the West Bank, from north to south, and the Jordan Valley to Tulkarem and the other places that are locked in, like we're divided. The community is divided by the wall, Nilin and Bilin. I would really go everywhere from South Hebron Hills and Hebron, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, of course, Jerusalem. And no, I would travel around, and of course,
Which places
I
like
would
you
tell
have a
you.
good connection with and memories? And if you can share,
Personally, I don't want to say because I'm scared. I'm scared then some ill-intended people could hear this conversation and hit these communities. But there are small villages in the Northwest Bank that have really personal memories. And yeah, I know that they are fiercely under attack by settlers and soldiers alike. And so. But for me now, it's not about personal memories. It's about my work of special rapporteurs. So I would go where most the attacks by settlers have been the most violent. I would visit the communities. I would love to talk to them and hear from them. Now, I have to say that the fact that I'm not, the fact that I'm not able to go there in person doesn't mean that I'm not available to the communities, because now this year less, but I've always had town hall meetings, for example, with people from villages, from refugee camps. I would I would have to go to Gaza, and I don't know where I would go because there are no landmarks for me in Gaza anymore. Gaza is a place where I've spent much less time than, and I know the Gaza society much less than because I've experienced it less than the Palestinian communities in the West Bank and Jerusalem. But every time I've been to Gaza, I've been struck by the generosity of the people, the hospitality, and also that there is a poetry in the people of Gaza that it reminds me very much of my own, and in the community, it reminds me of the communities of my own upbringing in south of Italy. This is really the Mediterranean part of us as people. So yeah, I would have to go everywhere, but I want to say, as I can't. I keep on talking to people. I will soon have a meeting with the children of Palestine under occupation, that I've had meetings with, including during the genocide. Many of the children I've interviewed for my third report are no longer with us. And still, there are kids who are still alive. And it's just, for me, it's incredible that they want to talk to me. They want their voices to be heard, and I will always be there for them, even if not physically.
Francesca Albanese, thank you very much for being with us, and we hope, like you, manage to visit Palestine soon and meet the people in Palestine on the ground and continue your important work addressing the human rights about Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.